All right, so I want to make tonight a little more practical. We've been, kind of heady theory. You probably realize by now that there have been multiple PhDs written in the field of Christian political theory. It is a very developed academic field, and it's a bottomless pit of academic material and books that you just can't read it all. And I've just tried to give you a little taste of it, just so you can know that this is not stuff that people are making it up as they go. They've been thinking about this for centuries and centuries and centuries. Since Augustine wrote City of God, this has been thought about a long, long time by some very capable thinkers. So I just want to give you a little touch. But tonight I want to do something a little more practical because folks are asking the question often, how do we as Christians think through the voting process, wherever you land on that? And I'm not going to try to get you to land any place, but just try to get you some basic ideas, because all of those things change from year to year and decade to decade. And the political parties change on you from decade to decade. If you think about it now, if JFK, a proud Democrat, were alive and well today, he would be considered a conservative, right? And so everything moves. Everything moves. And so you need principles that really don't attach to a particular party or anything, because you don't know what's going to come 20 years from now. Could be anything. So I want to kind of think through that together and give you some basic ideas and ways that I think through it. Then maybe next week I'm going to try to do a little bit on a very popular topic that you might have heard a lot about. A lot of books being written about it right now. You hear it as pejorative commentary on some news stations, but there's a phrase called Christian nationalism. No one knows what that means. It's used for everything from a pejorative attack on somebody, just a Christian nationalist, to theologians talking about what it means to Christianize the nation, those kind of things. We'll talk about that. And then the final week I want to talk about how your view of the whole of what God is doing and the return of Christ impacts how you think about reality now, particular political reality. Having said that, Christians don't vote demographically. A political consultant will tell you that Christians, by and large, do not vote. And something like 30 million Christians never go to the polls. And some of that is due to their theology. They think that the world is going to blow up anyway, and Christ will rapture them out of here, so there's no sense in voting. And so you see a lot of that. And so can I just say that that's not that Christian? And I'll get to that tonight. Go vote. Just get out and vote and exercise the stewardship the Lord has given you. And we'll talk about that in a minute. All right. So here's a John Adams. I was at the swearing in of my daughter at the Supreme Court in Portland on yesterday. She was sworn in as an attorney in the state of Maine. And the Chief Justice reminded them as they were being sworn in that they were saying the exact same oath that John Adams said when he was sworn in. Of course, Maine was part of Massachusetts then. Subsequently, Massachusetts changed the oath, but Maine has decided, and I think in wisdom, not to change a word of it. And so all those attorneys took the exact same oath that John Adams took. It was fun to watch them because they had to be sponsored. And the sponsor would make a motion before the court, and the motion would be to accept this person to the bar. And then here's the reasons that we think this person should be a member of the bar in the state of Maine. And then the justices would ask a couple questions and then grant the motion. And then so I heard a lot of young attorneys saying very atheistic things in response to those questions. And then with great pride, I heard them all, because they had to say the oath, and end it with, "So help me God." I couldn't have been prouder. Because that's just how the Lord works. You can deny him all you want, but if you really want to go somewhere in life, you're going to have to say, "So help me God." Well, this is one of the great John Adams quotes that I've put at the top of your paper. Our Constitution, meaning America, our Constitution was made only for a religious and moral people. It is wholly inadequate for the government of any other. And if you think about that, and we do want to think about that, that the way that our system is built relies very heavily on principles of Christianity, and I'll show you some of those things. But it was watching Hannah being sworn in yesterday, there was tremendous emphasis on truth-telling. You have to tell the truth to the court. As officers of the court, you can never hide the truth. You can never protect someone who's not telling the truth. You have to make sure that the court knows if truth is not being told. It depends completely on truth-telling. Otherwise, the system doesn't work at all. Well, how are you going to do that without Christ? Sinners aren't born truth-tellers. And John Adams understood how the system worked. So let's think through some of these principles. The first six, we see these as sort of principles of our Constitution, but the point that I want to make is this. You could not have the American Constitution without the presupposition of Christianity. It's true that not every person involved in writing the Constitution was a dyed-in-the-wool deep Christian, but most of them were, and they were swimming in a cultural soup that assumed Christianity. Remember, we hadn't had the Enlightenment yet. We hadn't had the celebration of evolution and atheism and all those sort of things. There's a whole cultural milieu that just simply assumed that there was a God and that God had come in Jesus Christ. So they didn't write the Constitution as if it was a church constitution, but these men were deeply sort of encased in a culture that had its very thought as a completely Christian thought. And so that's why you see these things, and I want to show you where some of them came from so you'll understand, because it will help us to think through how we're going to exercise our rights as we're voting and as citizens. And the first is, of course, individual liberty. Where did that idea come from? You can't get the idea of individual liberty from evolution. Individual liberty comes from only one idea, and that's the Imago Dei, that you are created in the image of God. And the Constitution of the United States virtually assumes that you were created in the image of God. And because you have those unalienable rights given to you by your Creator, in other words, there was someone above you who created you, your Creator. Creators create stuff. So you're not an accident. So because that's true, that liberty is based on the fact of your high standing and value because you are created in the image of God. That's the whole idea behind individual liberty. Remember what that did. That's a reversal of the traditional roles that you had seen in other cultures prior to that and subsequent to that. If we are created in the image of God, and if we have individual liberty, what that means is that the state exists for humans. Humans don't exist for the state. And so the state is only there to ensure that that liberty is maintained. And any time that that liberty is encroached on by the state, it is an attack on the image of God himself. That's the point. You would have never, ever, ever got that into a constitution that didn't assume that God had created humanity in his image. That's what that means. That's the first thing. The second thing is religious liberty, and one flows from the other, doesn't it? If we are created in the image of God, if we have individual liberty, then that means individuals have the right of religious expression. It's a natural consequence of having individual liberty. And so there's no such a thing, you realize, as separation of church and state. That was just a letter someone wrote, Jefferson wrote. It's not in the Constitution. Remember, every single one of the colonies, when we were founded, had a state church. And it's in the constitutions. Go back and read them. They had a state church. So what our Constitution was doing was, the writers of the Constitution were saying, since you have individual liberty, you therefore have religious liberty, and the state exists to protect your liberty. Therefore, the government can never, ever form a church called the Church of the United States. Each one of you have the right to have your own churches in your own individual states. That was the whole point. Why didn't they want that? Because they had just come from a place that had something called the Church of England. They didn't like that so much. So the Puritans were rebelling against that. When you de-link church from state and individuals from state, you are able to have a lot of liberty, but you are also stuck with what John Adams was worried about. You need something that is made for a moral and religious people, because now they're going to exercise their liberty, and if they don't exercise it in a moral way, we're going to sort of be in trouble. Which is why Islam never succeeds without state coercion. Have you thought of that? The reason that you always have to have an Ayatollah is because Islam is not built on redemption of mankind. Islam is built on moralism and law. And when you have mere moralism and not redemption, you're going to need to have someone to enforce the law and the moralism. And so always you end up in Muslim countries having some sort of Ayatollah dictatorship, because you have to have the coercion of the state to produce the religion. Third, since that's true, we have separation of powers. Again, where did this idea come from? It's Christian. Christians know that no single sinner is entirely dependable. Right? You don't get that idea without Christianity. Christianity teaches you that sinners are sinners and therefore need accountability. And if you don't build accountability systems in, sinners are going to do what sinners do. They're going to grab power for themselves. Sinners are intrinsically selfish. They want to control things. And so the framers of our Constitution, thinking in a Christian way, said we're going to need separation of powers. We know that these guys are a bunch of sinners, so we don't want to give any one of them too much power, so we're going to separate into the legislative branch and the executive branch and the judicial branch, and we're going to make sure that they're co-equal. And we're going to set up systems even within the branches. So that now within the judicial branch you have all kinds of court systems, from the state to the appellate to the district courts. There's always a way to try to overcome the decision of any one sinner. You get to appeal it. That's why you have the Senate and the Congress and House of Representatives. Because if they don't balance each other, it's going to be a problem. And then if you can't get the president to sign it, you send it back, you're going to need more votes. You can't trust any one sinner. That's why the executive branch, just can't up and just make a law by themselves. That's why, although, all of this is now being violated as you're learning. But the point is, how did we get this system that we're operating in? We got it because it was Christian thought from the very beginning. It was the implementation of Christian principles. If all of that's true, then what else do you have to have? Protection of minorities. If people are created in the image of God, that means that everybody's created in the image of God, not just some people. And so, again, the very Christian idea is that we need to protect all people of individual liberty. This is why, and I hope this is not news to you, that we do not live in a democracy. You know that, right? We live in a constitutional republic. Everybody clear on that? Don't make me draw lines on the board for this. This is so simple. We don't do it. Why? Because sinners, if you have a pure democracy, what will sinners do? It will be mob rule. It will be. That's what happens next. But Christian principles know that you can't have that. Christian principles are always representative government. You have priests, you have pastors, you have elders, you have deacons, you have representative government. The church government is a representative form of government. They got all of that from the Bible. That's where it came from. It's all representative government. So you need protection of minorities. So and Christianity provides that. Let me give you a little thought experiment. You're in a little town. I don't care how big the town is for your experiment. Let's call it a town of 15,000, just like Waterville. We have 15,000 people. Now, which one would you rather be? Would you rather be the one Christian with the entire rest of the town Muslim? Or would you rather be the one Muslim where the rest of the town is a Christian? Do I make my point? The Muslim is only going to get saved. But the Christian's going to get killed. And the reason is that Christians are taught to love their enemies. You don't get that idea, the protection of minorities, in any other format in the world. And so Christians, even though if you asked me today, Steve, would you like to have a completely Christian nation? Of course. That's what I want. But if I had a completely Christian nation, it would not put anybody who is not a Christian in any jeopardy whatsoever. Free to have their churches, free to think they want, free to argue, free to do anything they feel like. Why? Because we love our enemies. We protect people. Why do we protect them? Because they're created in the image of God. And so the safest place to be in the world is in a Christian nation. The most unsafe place to be in the world is in a non-Christian nation. Because you don't have the principles to guide it. Protection of minorities. Here's one you haven't thought about, but this is Christian too. Do you know that free trade is Christian? Now, when I say that, I know where we are. I'm not talking about crony capitalism, which is not Christian. And a lot of what we're experiencing now with the unholy alliance of corporate capitalism coupled with the coercion of government is not what we're talking about, all right? This is free trade gone completely sinfully sideways. I'll get back to the pure idea of free trade. How do you get free trade? First of all, you're creating the image of God, so you have individual liberty. Individual liberty to create your own family, individual liberty to create anything you want to create out of your giftedness. If your giftedness in metalworks, if your giftedness as a carpenter, whatever you're gifted at, you're now free to do that because you have individual liberty. And because you are created in the image of God, we understand that all of God's law matters. And so thou shalt not steal means what? Means property rights. Simple as that. You don't get to take stuff from other people. It means that you get to own your stuff. It means that even the government can't take it because that's thou shalt not steal. A lot of Christians say, it's okay if I vote all the money I can vote out of that guy's pocket. That's stealing. Do you know why we can have free trade? Because coveting's a sin. You don't get to covet other people's stuff. You don't get to covet other people's gifts. All of that stuff. You can't have free trade in the way that the Constitution designed it unless you assume the 10 Commandments. Can't have it. What you're going to have is coercion. What you're going to have is what we have now, which is a lot of crony capitalism. There's a reason that you can be censored. It's because the government agrees that you can be censored. If the government decided that you couldn't be censored, you wouldn't be. But since government and big business is now in bed together in really ungodly ways, we're going to experience trouble we never experienced before in a way we never thought about it before. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about how did we get where we got to in our country, and we got there because they were swimming in the soup of Christianity. They didn't try to create a Christian nation in the sense of creating, how can I put it this way, a Christian nation in the same sense that the Ayatollah wants a Muslim nation. They just said, we're going to apply Christian principles to the Constitution, and that Constitution is going to end up this resilient thing that will promote freedom. And that's what they did. And so you have ostensibly a Christian country without the Constitution saying we're a Christian country in that same sense, but you get all the same things. The sixth thing you have is a national virtue. A national virtue. These are written directly into the Constitution. Unalienable rights. We hold these self-evident truths. Well, what are those? Why were they self-evident? Because they were built in creation. All the Constitution is doing is assuming Romans chapter 1. God has created everyone in His image, and He holds them accountable. He says, does not nature itself teach you that there is a God? And that's exactly what they built into the Constitution. They have a little name for that in philosophy. They call that natural law. But it assumes a certain bottom level virtue and morality and a law that we all subscribe to. And that's the assumption, and that's why John Adams says our Constitution was made only for religious and moral people, and it is wholly inadequate for the government of any other. Do you hear what he's saying by that? He's saying the minute that you lose natural law, the minute that you lose a sense of a universal morality that governs us all, you're going to lose this country. That's what he meant by that. And that's where we are. That's where we are. And that's the real danger. The assumption behind this Constitution is that you're going to have a moral, virtuous people who understand that everybody's created in the image of God and they are to be treated accordingly, which means they have religious liberty. That means you don't attack them, you don't hate them. It means that there's separation of powers, that there's going to be a lot of places for sinners to make mistakes, so we're going to have checks and balances all over the place. State government county government, town government, national government. We're going to have different legislative branches. We're going to have different judicial branches, courts, because you can't trust any one sinner to do anything right. So we're going to have all of these checks and balances, and that's going to protect everybody. It's going to protect the minorities. Even the least likely person to be protected is going to be protected in a country like that. And that's going to allow us to trade freely with one another. I'm going to be able to make what I want to make. I'm going to be sell it to you. If you want to buy it, if you don't want to buy it, you can buy it from someone else. All are built on completely Christian principles and based on the Ten Commandments. The Ten Commandments are the basic law of our land. Think about it. The basic law of our land are the Ten Commandments. Every one of the Ten Commandments, we used to have blue laws. Those are gone. You have a whole system of family law to cover honor your mother and father. I mean, there's whole courts for this, there's whole laws written for it, right? I suppose I don't have to go down through thou shalt not steal. You can visit some guys right over in Warren that will tell you that didn't work out the way they wanted it to. Honestly, thou shalt not murder. You see, we had a little murder here, right here in Waterville, right in the parking lot. Local stuff. Somebody's mad at somebody. You don't have to describe it. Perjury, lying. You don't perjure yourself. You could still go to jail for perjuring yourself. All of this is just part, warp and woof of our law. That's all it is. And so you should understand that as you're living as a Christian citizen, you're living in a constitutional republic that could not be this constitutional republic unless it had assumed Christianity as its basic premise for everything in the Constitution. That was true one time. Not as true now. Not as true now. And it's starting to change, which means you need to stay engaged. You need to vote. You need to speak up. You need to go to the city council meetings and talk as loud as you want about anything you want to talk about. You need to show up at the hearings in Augusta and talk as loud and as often as you can. You have to march around the courthouse with a little sign, you march. You write your congressman. You stay engaged. Stay engaged. Christians, we're not separatists. We're not going to go hide and drink herbal tea in the lotus position on the mountain until Jesus comes. It's crazy. It's crazy talk. All right. Having said that, politics are messy. Right? Because remember what our topic tonight is, how to choose between two evils. And so we have to think about this. So I'm going to give you a little thought experiment, right? I'm going to describe two real historical candidates. And you have to pick one. You only get two, right? And you're Christians. I mean, most of you, right? Christians. Oh, good. I mean, it looks like we're batting 1,000 in here tonight at least. That noon crowd tomorrow, you don't know about them. But tonight, we're good. All right, so I'm going to describe candidate number one. Remember, I'm not making this up. And I don't have time for a lot, but I'm just giving you a little description. Okay, ready? Okay. All right, first, number one. Significantly expanded the military till it was almost a military nation. Overpoweringly. Not just taxes, but confiscatory taxes. Took money till people begged him not to do it anymore. Stole personal property and land from people and gave it to his political allies. Okay, that's one guy. Now you only get to vote. Second guy. Very public adulterer. multiple women. Multiple. Again, public. Murderer. Nepotism. Brought the kid in. You know how that works. Always fun. And then sold out this country to foreign leaders so that the country was hurt. Now you're a Christian, you got to choose one. Do you want the expansion military tax, steal the property and give it to his political allies guy? Or do you want the adulterer, multiple women, brings the kid in, sells the country out to foreigners guy? Do you have a preference? Who wants the first guy? You're a Christian, you got to pick one. Anybody want the second guy? Oh look, you're Christians, you don't want anybody. See? You got to choose. Do you know who these two politicians are? You do? The first one was King Saul, and the second one was King David. You had to choose somebody.
That's good.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you, Manny. Politics are messy. And there's no getting around that. Jesus had a great line in Luke. Do you remember he said? He said, the children of this age are wiser than the children of light. In other words, you say, you know, Christians can be naive. They just don't get how to operate in a sinful world. They just don't get it. And so we are living right now in times where Christians are not participating because, and honestly, this is on both sides now. I think I have never been safer in saying that Christians on both sides of our current presidential election literally hate the other candidate. On both sides. You know, doesn't matter what side you're on. And if they don't hate the other candidate, they have such a visceral reaction that they can't, you know, they can, and each side can't imagine why the other side thinks the way they think, right? I mean, isn't that where we are? Yeah. It is. And people who have no Christian basis at all, historians and political commentators see it clearly because they say we are a country completely divided now. Yeah. And it's almost sort of one of those facts of life that, you know, we can't overcome. Well, you know, what are we going to do? We're going to have to make a choice. You're going to go into the voting booth and you're going to make a choice. And we're going to talk about how to do this, but you are only ever, as long as you live in a sinful world, only ever, ever, ever going to make a choice between two evils. And we'll talk about how to at least maybe come up with one that's better than the other. But those are the choices. And sometimes choosing what clearly is the religious party doesn't help you. Think about this for a minute. This is all through your Bible. Think about Paul. He is being persecuted by his religious contemporaries. He was a member of the Sanhedrin, a rabbi, and got to the point where, you know, he was first so much on the side of the rabbis, he killed Christians. He's a murderer. And think about what it takes for them to be killing Stephen, and he's sitting there holding the guy's coat, saying, I'll hold that, you go ahead. It takes a certain steeliness, doesn't it? Then the Lord saves him. And now, you know, what goes around comes around. Now, all of the guys that he was in bed with before killing Christians want to kill him. And so he has a choice. He's being persecuted, he's being hunted, and he has the religious guys that he can appeal to, or the complete atheists. And what did he say? Take me to Caesar. I'd rather take that guy than these religious crazy people. at least I'll get a fair hearing from Caesar. Think about that. By the way, how'd that go for Paul? Not so good. Nero killed him. But he already knew that the Jews were going to kill him anyway. So he figured, well, I'll appeal to Nero, godless Nero. I mean, Nero killed his own mother for political gain. Nero covered Christians with tar and stuck them in his garden and burned them as torches to light his gardens. He was a completely crazed, evil person. Paul said, I'm going to appeal to that guy rather than these religious people. It's messy, right? It's just a complete mess. And so what I don't want you to think as Christians is that you are in some sort of idyllic pre-heaven, that now you're going to be able to find, for once, a choice that's like Jesus Jr. You're not. So you're going to have to be wise as a serpent and harmless as a dove. Remember what Jesus said? You're going to have to be thinking through the process. You're going to have to come to some reasonable conclusion. And you know what a compromise is, right? No one gets anything they want. No one gets everything they want. I should have said. No one gets everything they want. Everybody gives up something. As we think through making political decisions Christianly, point C, these 7 things, I want to remind you of something as you think through these 7 issues. And it's the thing that we understand as Christians, that God alone in Jesus Christ is Lord of heaven and earth. The earth is the Lord's and everything in it. So don't fret, don't worry. Even if Christians all made the wrong decision in any given election year between now and Christ's return, I suspect the Lord is going to get his own way no matter what. He is going to bring his creation to a glorious conclusion in his timing. But in the meantime, things can be very, very messy. Think about what this looked like in a timeline. Now, this isn't your notes. This is all free of charge. There's no extra thing for this. So you start in the Roman Empire, a completely godless empire that was built on Caesar is Lord. You're going to worship him, or it's not going to work out for you. You can worship anybody else you want, as long as Caesar is Lord. And you get 12 guys in the middle of millions and millions. 12 guys. That's it. Jesus says to those 12 guys, just before he departs, all authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. Now, that he's either right about that or he's not. All authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. That means, even though Caesar thinks he's Lord, it's actually me. I am Lord. 12 guys buy that. And he says, therefore, because that's true, what I want you to do, based on that knowledge and with that motivation, is I now want you to go into all the world and preach the gospel to every tribe, tongue, and nation. Nation. Political entities. And what I want you to do is teach them to obey everything I've commanded. Teach them the law of God. That's what I want you to do. 12 guys. There's a few million on the face of the planet. The Roman Empire runs everything, all the way from Africa to Ireland at this point. You can still see the Roman ruins in Great Britain. You can go look at them. They ran everything. And you never, ever disagreed with a Roman soldier. They knew how to kill people. 12 guys. That's when Jesus ascended in the year 33 AD, let's call it. How long is that going to take? By 330 AD, and I'm using round numbers, that's just 300 years, right? A little longer than we have been a republic. Constantine declares the Roman Empire to be Christian and outlaws everything that's not Christian. 12 guys. How'd that happen? All authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. Go therefore and preach the gospel to every tribe, tongue, and nation. So that's a pretty good run for 300 years, right? Most of us think Christ should have come back right then. Because, you know, that's batting 1,000. You're in the Baseball Hall of Fame if you're getting that much wood on the ball. That's pretty good. But that's not what happens. After the break of the Roman Empire, things begin to disintegrate. And in disintegrating, you get my people, the Vikings. And you get all kinds of do you want to get that?
Yes, my God.
Okay. It's not your bookie? You get tribalism, you get the Huns, you get the Goths, it's just a mess. And then you say, for a great period of time, where's the Lord? Where's everything going? And then you see over time, and I'm going to shorthand this, seeing over time, and we come to the medieval world, which is virtually all Christian again. But it goes south again, doesn't it? Because the church, remember our jurisdictions, the church pretty much was the government. You get bad popes, it's just a complete mess all over again. And then you go through the Reformation, and we get Protestants, and we're starting over again, and we get the Enlightenment, and things don't grow in a linear way, they grow in zigzag. And you have great periods of advance of the gospel, and great periods of what looks like defeat, pullbacks, advances, pullbacks, advances, pullbacks. And you have, great revivals. You have the Great Awakening, the Second Great Awakening. America virtually becomes a Christian nation again for much of the colonial period. Just when I say Christian nation, not everybody's a Christian. I don't mean that. I just mean that it's just that's the air everybody breathed. And now we're in a pullback again. 12 guys started it. How many Christians are on the planet today? Just alive today. I'm not talking about the aggregate of all those Christians who have lived between the time of Christ and now. I mean just today, alive and well. 2 billion. Worshiping every Sunday. Now, they all don't show up, we've noticed. But they're Christians and we know it. 2 billion. The Lord's not done. He's promised every tribe, tongue, and nation. And that's what's going to happen. And so, 12 to 2 billion, and then everybody in between, and we're going to keep going. So if we have a little pullback, I just don't want you to get discouraged, okay? It's messy. It's messy. So let's, as we're going to now think about remaining engaged, making hard decisions in what looks like a kind of a pullback for us anyway. How are we going to think about that? I've got 7 principles, and I have written them all out for you so you wouldn't have to write them out yourself. First of all, politics is not salvation. There is no other name under heaven by which man can be saved other than Jesus Christ. Now, the most important thing you read when you read that is there's no other name under heaven. That means your name too. You can't save yourself. It also means that any collective of you that you think really highly of can't save you either, like your political party. You know, we went through a period in evangelical Christianity where everybody thought being a Republican was going to make everybody safe and save us all. Now, you've learned better than that by now, right? I guess by now you know that didn't work out. Why? Because the Lord will not have any competitors. So your political party can't save you. You are not saved by politics. You're saved by the grace of Jesus Christ. And politics are a temporary jurisdictional period of time until Christ returns. He has installed that, as we learned on Sunday morning. He's installed the state to protect and to provide justice for crime, and we get to pay for that with taxes. But we know we live in a sinful world, so that state is going to try to do much more than the Lord ever wanted it to do. That's where we are now. And we're moving in a way that has much more state involvement and coercion than we've ever experienced in the United States. That is happening. And it may get pulled back, it may not, in the providence of the Lord. Having said all that, you're not saved by your political enterprise. So trust the Lord. And go ahead and pull the trigger on somebody. Number 2, vote thinking about all the commandments. What do I mean by that? I'll give you the most common example right now for Christians. And you know, and I'm not saying anything I think that's going to surprise you, but I'm not just a little bit against abortion. I'm virulently against abortion. It's child sacrifice, it's barbaric, and it's a level of sin that I can't even contemplate anybody voluntarily choosing to do. That is my official position.
Amen.
Thank you. Having said that, we have Christians who only vote on that issue. It doesn't matter what the other issues are. They're only going to vote on that. The problem is that there are 10 commandments. Thou shalt not murder is definitely one of the commands. But it's not the only command of God. And the commands of God are all interlocked. Remember what James said, you break one, you break them all. Right? So that means we have to think wisely. Now, what are you going to do? Both of your choices this time, one is more enthusiastic for abortion than the other, but both parties have built abortion into their platforms, whether you like it or not, both of them. What are you going to do? Well, you're going to have to pick one. And you can just say, well, I'm going to only vote on that particular issue, and I'll pick the one who is less sinful than the other, but they're both sinful. Once you have an abortion, saying that I'm only willing to have it up to 6 months, but I'm willing to have it all the way to 9 months, yes, they're both barbaric and they're both sinful, but honestly, by the time you decide to have an abortion at any period of time, you've already violated the command of God. Now we're just arguing about what month you're going to do it. I mean, it's all gross and awful. So, how are you going to make a decision? Well, there are other commands. The command to not steal. Who's going to take your taxes more? Who's going to steal from you more? The command. Who's going to surround themselves with Christians? There's all other kind of things you have to think about. So I don't think as Christians we can be single issue voters anymore. We can't be. Believe me, abortion's high on my list. But I have to think through all of the issues together. Which leads me to number 3. Politicians don't show up alone. None of them got there alone. They have a whole host of people surrounding them that are guiding them through decision making, through policies, and all of those things. And you're not voting for a person, you're voting for a complete system, and you have to think through that whole system. Who are they bringing with them? You get 4,000 appointees as the president. 4,000 appointees, and that's it. We are now in a system where our bureaucracy, which has around 4 million employees, that's who's actually running on a day-to-day basis the government. As you know, I am licensed, or was licensed, am licensed currently still, by the Securities and Exchange Commission. And they're issuing rules all the time. Whether you're in conformity to those rules, in compliance with those rules, they're issuing to you all the time. If you think a President of the United States has any idea what is happening in the Securities and Exchange Commission, I'm sorry, they don't. No clue at all. It's worse than that. The guy at the top of the Securities and Exchange Commission, or the girl, has no idea either. Because when my industry, when I was actively involved as an investment advisor, when we wanted to push back against a particular issue, we never got that done at the top. We had to hire lobbyists, and all that stuff gets done at a level that no one knows anything about. The president, the head of the Securities and Exchange Commission, that all gets done deep in the bureaucracy. And half the congressmen don't know what's happening in the agencies on the committees. So the question is, who are they bringing with them? And so I always ask the question, which candidate is more likely to have more Christians hanging around? Which one is open to at least having, or having an open ear to Christians? Who will be willing to hear from Christians? Who will be willing to entertain, or at least give a seat at the table to Christians? I ask the question, who's more likely to do that? Because they don't ever come alone. Number 4, and you know this, the two-party system is an adversarial system. And as Christians, we're taught not to be all that adversarial, right? We're taught to get along with our neighbor. We're taught to love your enemy. We're taught, return good for evil. Make sure you turn the other cheek. And then you say, if I do all that stuff, when I visit Washington, D.C., they're going to run over me. And they will. That's all true. That's what they're going to do. But understand that as Christians, we automatically are in the middle of an adversarial relationship in politics. And the problem now that most of us are facing is that the two-party system has essentially become a one-party system in principle. And that is just how things work when things are driven by money. And when you can make a lot of money, the two parties will suddenly agree on everything if everybody's getting paid. If everybody's getting paid. And I won't detail that, I'll get censored again. But that's exactly what happens, all right? So, as a Christian, you're going to think, okay, I understand this is adversarial. Is there going to be a point where who I'm voting for will push back on the things that I want to be pushed back on? Or are they going to just easily agree to just everything that comes down the pike? Or are they the kind of person who will stand up and say, you know what, you want to get in a fight? Let's get in a fight. Happy to do it, let's go. You're going to have to make that sort of a decision. Number 5, and you'll be pleased to know, that the election is not for pastor-in-chief. The election is for commander-in-chief. That's who you're voting for. So the standards for a pastor are in Scripture, and they're high. And when you have a congregational meeting and you decide to call a pastor, you dare not vote against those commands in Scripture. If you do, you're going to hate your church because you're going to hire a charlatan. You are. It will be awful. And I can say without fear of much pushback that when you vote for president, either way, you're hiring a charlatan. All of them lie. Lying is a currency of exchange. And if, as a Christian, you don't know that, and you can find ways to justify it. Say, well, the general population would be moved in the wrong direction if we told them the whole truth. The noblesse oblige. We want to be careful not to get everybody upset. Because we're the elite, we kind of know what's going on. So we can't trust everybody with the truth. You can use that kind of rationale, and when you stand before the Lord, He's going to say you were lying. Because that's what it is. You're lying. But I want to encourage you, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, this gives me great joy to report they all lie. So you just have to decide how they're shaping the information, whether that information, if you can ferret it out, and the way you do that is compare and contrast. Try to get a lot of information, try to find out a lot of people talking about it, see if you can read between the lines. You're just going to have to be wise in that, but you're not voting for a pastor. You're not. So the standards are not the same. They're not. Number 6, exercise stewardship. You subscribe to the sovereignty of God if you're a Christian. Well, if you subscribe to the sovereignty of God, then I want to talk to you about 2 things. And then God has sovereignly, in His wisdom, placed you here at this time and in this place to be the salt and light. And you operate under a constitution. And the Constitution says this: the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. It's the 10th Amendment. It's your responsibility to participate and vote. But it's worse than that, because now I have a Bible verse for you. Jeremiah 29:7, do you remember what God says to the Israelites? He sends them into captivity. You know what captivity is, right? They become slaves. No fun. Terrible. No one wants that. Sends them into captivity. Babylon takes everything from them, kills a bunch of people, takes them back to Babylon. Now they're not going to get to speak their language. They're not going to get to worship. They're not going to get to do anything but be a slave to somebody else. And you'd say, what is God going to say to those kind of people? Be subversive revolutionaries. Make sure that you kill everybody on the sly as much as you possibly can. Go underground with this. You want to make sure we have an underground militia. Make sure that this is what God says to those people. Seek the welfare of the city where I have sent you into exile. Seek the welfare of the city where I have sent you into exile. So I say to you, Christians, seek the welfare of the country where God has sent you into exile. Do your best to make this place better. Leave it better than where you found it. Vote, get involved. Do not abdicate your stewardship that the Lord has given you. It's your responsibility. Don't be one of the 30 million Christians that don't vote. And then finally, I always ask this question: which candidate most opposes Christianity and the principles of Christianity? If this candidate gets everything this candidate wants, is this going to be a help to Christianity, or is this going to hurt Christianity? And on all 7 of those, I have made a decision in this presidential election. And I want you to make one too. And you'll have to make it before the Lord. It's none of my business. I don't need to know. I would just like to know in my heart, you got out and voted. So go do it. And do it to the glory of God. Let's pray together. Lord, we thank you tonight for your word. I pray that you will make us responsible stewards. You have placed us here in this country and at this time. And so I pray that we will not just bury our heads in the sand, but we will stay engaged and involved as the salt and the light that you have called us to be. We pray that you will empower us to do this through your Spirit. For Christ's sake we pray. Amen.